Boo. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're having a jolly weekend and you're not going to work tomorrow. That's got to be a good one. Some interesting stuff picked up to the day, but it's not actually new. I think we just ignored. We'll use the term negas because it might not be buzzing at the moment, but I'm pretty sure the fact checks will go all over it in the future, so we'll be a bit careful what's said. Good evening, Cos, PY, Debit, hello. Right. So, negas, it would appear, is in the water, the food, and then spraying it from the air. It would appear, according to some research, a specific venom. Negas. I can't really see. If I say the name, it might get shut off down the line. So just understand what negas means. Viper, as it were. So there's a lot of data about, which I have checked out. The data itself holds water. It stands true in relation to what's being said about the function of it, particularly something called PLA2. However, what is important, and it is vitally important, and that is what isn't on the table, is the actual evidence that they've actually found this substance in anything that I earlier mentioned. So, it might turn out to hold water. If it does, it's brilliant news because it's treatable. So, that said, I'll say no more. However, if you wish to have a look at what I did pull together, then it's on the face ache, which I put up there yesterday. So you can get a gist of what I'm saying from that if you so choose, anyway. So that's that. Good evening to you. Joining the dots, Paul Sefton, Slipknot, and Andrea. How are you? Do you have a channel on BitChute? I do. I have channels all over the shop. I just never use them. So I started to use Rumble, which has been fine. However, what I'm realizing is my Firefox is totally and utterly blanked. So a lot of things that I didn't think I could do because of the platforms, it actually turns out it's the whatever's going on the Firefox. So that's off. That's been kicked out of here. So for now, anyway. So okay, so we just have a recap of what we did over the last couple of live streams, which we were looking at this idea of the heavenly Jerusalem, and then we offered the rebuttal also. So we gave it a good play. We put all the cards on the table from both camps. Of course, the rebuttal was presented in 2019, and a lot has happened since then, has it not? So whether it be real or nay, still yet to be determined, but I think on balance, it's certainly the pendulum is swinging to, yeah, there's something in it. So I think I just end on that with sort of this suggestion that if it does turn out to be correct, then we are seeing, by definition of their own moves, those who say they are Jews but are not. Because if that is the homeland of this priesthood, currently with a lot of power, then they're telling you and showing you that there are no connection whatsoever to the Semitic languages, the Semitic peoples, or the Middle East. So that should be kept in mind, because they're telling you that if that's the case, if this turns out to be correct, then that is exactly what they're telling you. That all along it's been correct that they are not what they say they are, but have pretended with great success to the contrary for a very long time. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Now, we did last week touch on to the quiet war, because of course we've got this Ukraine nonsense going on all over the shop. If you're to believe the media, the SAS are in there training in Kiev, training the soldiers. There's a lot of people who are saying, well, the Third World War has pretty much begun, because it is actually NATO versus Russia. So the sinking of the ship, you know, if that is a NATO connected operation, then it's fair to say that they're on. You know, that it's going hot. So there's potential that they're going to get one going. But, you know, if you go back to sort of the 1984 book, it's permanent war, isn't it? It's that they set up. It's not so much of an annihilation kind of thing in a war. It's a permanent state of war, because, of course, under that process, they get emergency powers, which is what they've got everybody on, plus the bankruptcies, etc., etc. Everybody's being controlled as a bankrupt corporation, and you're the assets. So we've discussed all that. We know that. But you get into the idea of the quiet war. And first thing is that they're celebrating in 1979 that they're celebrating 25 years of the Third World War underway. So that's one admission there. I think that comes from NASA, or maybe not. I'm not sure. There's two documents that we'll have a look at. So it's suggesting that the Third World War in and of itself was the quiet war. So where they've implemented all the mind control abilities through the TV, through celebrity, film, theatre, all the arts, etc. That was a big part of the quiet war. This building of this Wi-Fi network everywhere is another aspect of that war. The mobile technology that they've got everybody addicted to is another aspect of that quiet war. So in effect, when we look back, you can pretty much say that, yeah, that's definitely been going on, without a doubt, you know. So suggesting then that the actual Third World War that everybody's waiting for, because of course the media and the lunatics at the top are creating that, it's actually happened. It's been and it's done and it's gone. They've succeeded in accomplishing what they wanted to do, which is getting the population as malleable, obedient, and pretty much terrified, which appears to be what a lot of people are finding if they're trying to get your vote for May on the doorstep, that people are actually afraid. So, yeah, well, turn the frigging telly off. Turn the telly off and don't talk to anybody that looks like they're tapped. Wear a mask on or such. Because I've noticed the noggins are starting to put them on again. Well, what's changed? It can only be the television, because nothing's changed in my world, you know. So just turn the bloody thing off. Do something else instead. Go and do something less boring instead. What's that from? Do you remember that? I remember that. Anyway, so yeah, it's definitely, they're firing it up again. It would appear that the old bird flu is coming back. There's moves in America to start to control the poultry, chicken in particular, the eggs. They're talking about licensing farmers to hold cattle. So they're doing a lot of things in the background, and it's all, of course, being covered by blaming Vlad the Impaler, who is just playing his role and has decided to kick it off in the Ukraine. And now that's become a new playground for the lunatics, with your children, your offspring rather, joining the ranks. So there you go. Lots and lots going on there. Now, Third World War as a quiet war, has it been? Is this just a charade? Because of course, when you get into the guts of this quiet war, what you get out of it, in parts of it, is that basically they're setting the game up so they will attack the populations of each individual nation within their own nation. Now, the greatest cover for that will be to because what they're building up, there's going to be a nuclear explosion. Well, we would be none the wiser who set it off if one went off. And the media had reported it however they were told to report it. So, you know, just in building up this furore, any Tom, Dick, or Harry could set one off. Because the theatre's hot and going, and they're already have accused Russia of going to do it, everybody'd assume that'd go silly, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. But any lunatic can sort of kick this off, and because there's been missing nuclear weapons from the Thatcher years. David Cameron was like a special envoy there when he was a little imp, running around trying to cover these missing nuclear weapons. I have a full report on the website, so I've mentioned it. I will put it up after this video. But yeah, Cameron was an interesting character. You know, he didn't just come out of nowhere. This guy was groomed right from the get-go, and with Thatcher's little bitch on many things. A very important subject matter as well, by the way, and secret, because it were all naughtiness. So yeah, and from that report you get to see a bit insight of Mandela. As far from being this supreme hero, was actually just a fully paid up agent, and probably never spent longer than a day in any prison just to get the photo shoots, because he were brought in, I think, 1987. It was decided then that he would become the South African leader, and the agreement was the first thing he had to do was borrow $5 billion from the IMF and arm South Africa to the teeth before they shifted control and handed it over to the Zulus, as it were. So yeah, so you get a lot of insight into what we're actually going on in the background there with these Iran and super gun and all this kind of nonsense, which I think brings in Sir Peter Blaker as well. So, but that's another report. Anyway, let's get down to business for today, which is the Third World War about to happen, or has it happened? Today. So we need to kick off with a little shufti at Albert Pike, which I'll bang up here for you. There you go. Good evening, Kerry. Why don't you? Why don't you? That's exactly what that's from. Yes. Saturday mornings are a joy. Were they not? Okay. Right, now I need to kick off over here. So this is basically Albert Pike. It's a letter from Pike to Mazzini, which is Giuseppe Mazzini. He was sort of the chief barone of the mafias over in Europe, said to be Italian, but obviously when you get down to nitty-gritty, they're nothing of the sort. And it's basically presenting a communication between the two back in 1871. So 1871, folks, it's a long time ago, in which the Three World War strategy was presented. And of course, the fact it was released, that was the telegraphing of the same. Now, specifically, we just go to the Third World War. In fact, no, sorry, let's read it from the First World War. It says, in a letter dated 15th of August, 1871, from Albert Pike to Mazzini, it is said that Pike presented the plan to consolidate the world under the direction of Lucifer would be achieved through 3 world wars. And the First World War, he says, must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and the Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of this war, communism will be built and be used to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. So that's what they were basically setting up, or what they were achieving through the First World War. Not to mention killing all the men, incorporating all these program indentured servants all over the shop, picking up the Masonic lodges after all their guys have been slaughtered. We've discussed what else went on in the First World War. It tied the UK government to the support of the then coming Israel by getting the Americans into the war, because of course we were going to surrender in 1914 by the end of it. Now, the Second World War, he says, must be fomented by taking advantage of the difference between the fascists and the political Zionists. Well, it was perfect for that, wasn't it? Because the Zionists were born out of the supposed enemies of Adolfo. He says this war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism is strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would then be restrained and held in check until the time when it would need for it to be for the final social cataclysm. So they've restrained it in readiness to be used in order they can create this final social cataclysm. Well, now this is why I think we need to understand or examine, has the Third World War been, or is it to come? Because if the Third World War's been, and it was the Quiet War, then what they're setting up now is this social catastrophe. So, of course, the breaking down the Roman system is going to create that, isn't it? So now we're up to the Third World War, and it says must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. This war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on the issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. Well, that's been, hasn't it? Because they actually kicked off that war hot with George H. Bush when they first went over and attacked Babylon or Iraq. So, they achieved that, didn't they? They got the other nations divided as we've been all the way through, because if you're sane, you could see that we really shouldn't have been getting involved in that in any way, shape, or form, because it's got absolutely nothing to do with us, basically. But the fact that the people that run those places have control over our leaders, then it just had to be that we were involved. So they kicked it off. It got Christians involved in a Zionist Islamic war. To the point now, let's look. We are economically exhausted and bankrupt. Spiritually, there is none. There is none left, much, is there? Because most people succumb to the last couple of years. And pretty much we are at a point of complete physical exhaustion. Are we not? Well, if you're following the nonsense on the TV, you will be, which shines brightly when I'm walking around, and you can see people that are absolutely exhausted with the onslaught of fear, more fear, and shoot yourself all the more. So, that's happened, hasn't it? That's the Third World War. You could say that's the aim of it, moving Christendom into exhaustion, while, of course, implementing the Zionists and the Islamists all over our land to continue that fight and ensure that we're dragged into it here as well. So, clever stuff, but that's done and dusted. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effects of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of their most bloody turmoil. Well, the nihilists and the atheists, who are them? Well, it's Black Lives Matters, the Islamists themselves, the Zionists themselves, because they're all, they're all promoting at the end of everything for themselves and their enemies. So that's nihilism in its absolute. The atheist, in the sense that they don't believe in the creator, the creator of the earth, because of course they're all in the world. Because if you weren't in the world, you wouldn't be manipulated into these 3 world wars. So there you go. And Antifa, these nihilist idiots that run around demolishing their own country, its business, its infrastructure, its cohesion, based on nonsense, most of the time, but they believe it and off they go. So again, we can see another aim of the Third World War is on, it's game on. It says the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, which is absolutely what's going on, but that's entirely at the feet of the churches themselves, because they've been pushing garbage, and they've been pushing garbage for, well, I'd say since Civil War in this nation. What was a happy-go-lucky nation became, you can't dance, you can't sing, you can't go to pub, you can't do this, you can't do that. They're Puritan. So, it's never been right since then. Let's be quite frank. Anyway. It says the multitude disillusioned with Christianity will receive the true light through the universal, and I've in bracketed Jesuit Vatican II system, manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. So the externalization of the hierarchy, which is what theosophy teaches. That's what we're experiencing. So you get all this pedophilia, the fact that Obama set up all these biolabs in Ukraine, the fact that, this is a fact, but they're reporting it, that Putin is reckoning to save 35,000 kids from these trafficking networks, all centered in the Ukraine. So, there's enough puff and wind out there to satisfy the left feedback loop and also the right feedback loop. Trump's not even doing anything, but Putin's backing him up. You can see it's just clever stuff, but it does keep the masses bedazzled to the point that they switch off and they're not really interested in it anymore. It says this will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. So I've added after that, just on this particular report, it says, is it after the third and final war that the Illuminati plan to create the greatest ever social catastrophe, leaving Christendom at the mercy of the Freemasonic and therefore the Jesuit Illuminati created Evangelical movement, today supported by Pope Francis, and to scoop up the remaining populations through legal contract? And of course, where I used to get that kind of sight or vision when I was studying some of the earlier stuff, as these backstreet churches started to become basically the Church of England, all these African educated white vicars that are now pouring into the Church of England. You've got the Dick Wellesby, supposed head of the Church of England, who's now declared today on the back of this land idea that it goes against the plan of God. Well, it was only a few years ago that tape was going on about saying he didn't even know whether there were a God. So what kind of an idiot have you got running Church of England? The guy's obviously, he's psychotic if he's not on the same road as Biden and he's got dementia. No, I don't think he's got dementia. That guy's a clever little smoky boy. And I watched the little face he pulled today in one of his, after he'd done his little speech, and that was the most smug, smirky, like looking at his boss saying, yeah, I did it, I'm back, kind of shit. So, yeah. It's already twisted up and turning around. So the evangelical movement as a whole has been placed into so many of our social systems. Food banks are in full control of. I did a report about that way back. Trussell Trust. Above that is the Dulverton Trust, which people didn't really know much about. But the Trussell Trust in general is running these food banks, and it's all being run by these backstreet, happy-clappy satanic churches. And we could see that in the doctrines of the time, that they had a plan eventually to flip it to you'll get 3 handouts of food. But to get the first one, you'll signed a contract, and there'll be intervention orders in that contract. And that the plan was basically they'll give you 3 handouts, and if you come back for a 4th, you're going to be deemed unfit to look after your children, and intervention will be the order of the day. So that's what we saw, and this is what 2008, 9, maybe 10 when they were pushing these out, while they had that bird flu thing going on back in the day, H1N1 pish. This is all the changes that were going on in the background were immense, especially around mental health. It was just ridiculous, but nobody was seeing that stuff because you were all focused to the fear they were pushing out about this disease that were carried about by migrating birds. I mean, beat that, for God's sake. Beat that. You can't, can you? You can't beat that. It's impossible. So basically that's is it. So the sort of context for it to be potentially that we've had the Third World War, just off that alone pretty much shows it's potentially possible that is the case. Now, if we go to the modern warfare strategy against the populations, which is coordinated by the Bilderberg Steering Committee, and there's been a lot put out about Bilderberg for many, many years. Tony Gosling has been an expert on that for a long time, but nobody ever sort of got down to the nuts and bolts of what the steering committee actually did. What we do know is that this Bilderberg meet every year. At the beginning of the year is the way that the Committee of 300 actually present the year's agenda, which has been decided in between Christmas and New Year on the QE2 ship port in Venice, Venetian Bay, by the black nobility, which will become apparent as we read through this report. What is their real agenda? What is it that they are actually doing? So I'll give you this link. Then you've got it. And I'll have a look at what you guys are on about. You can see those who watch the show. They are absolutely terrified, and they're all putting the masks back on, I've noticed. It's like even in the cars, it's just quite bizarre. They constantly put obstacles between us and the Creator. But then, is it them putting them there? That's the job, isn't it? You know, you have to maneuver yourself. And the greatest way to avoid a lot of the traps that are set for everybody is the more you cleanse yourself, the higher your frequency. You remove yourself from the frequency of those particular traps. Doesn't mean there's not a shitload more, because there are. But are they traps, or are they like just lessons? It feels like you're in a computer game, to be fair, sometimes. You know, it's weird. But yeah, they do put obstacles, but we're there to maneuver around them. Right, back to the shit show. So I put this together in 2017. And basically what we get, well, let me just nip down to this. Where is it? Right. The second document, we'll just go to that first. It says, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, Top Secret, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, Operation Research Technical Manual, TW, SW 7905.1. And it says, welcome aboard. This publication marks the 25th anniversary of the Third World War, called the Quiet War, being conducted using subjective biological warfare fought with silent weapons. Well, that's your medical. Okay. So subjective biological warfare. That's through your medical, all of it. The geoengineering, the shit in your food, the shit that can get into the water. That's the subjective biological warfare, and they're celebrating 25 years of it. Okay. And this is May 1979. Okay. So what's 25 years back from that? Work that out. That's when the Third World War began. according to this document. And back to what Albert Pike was saying, you look at what they've achieved already, they were in aims of the Third World War. We have to look at it in this way, because for me, I think what we need to be more concerned about is not what the hell's going on in Ukraine. Because if they're going to start throwing nuclear weapons about, they're going to start throwing nuclear weapons about. There's no point chatting yourself. Just give yourself this insight. Well, why would they bomb Aki? I mean, I know I'm here, but I'm not that important. Why the fuck would they bomb Aki? Yeah, they're not interested. And if you apply that to mostly where you live, it's not going to happen, is it? You know what I'm saying? So just put a bit of common sense into that, and then you'll not shit yourself. If they're going to start setting them off, let them. Get on roof and watch. It'll be a good fireworks show. That's what I'd do anyway. I'd be up as high as I could to watch them. So there you go. They celebrated 25 years of it going on in May 1979. So right, back to this report, because you might as well just read through it, because I can't remember exactly what I was blabbering on about. But basically, the crunch of it is that the Bilderberg Steering Committee is actually, in what its job is to do, is to implement this subversive system, which is including all the biological stuff, the corporate trap with the person, the straw man, under your Admiralty Maritime, through the Royal Society. It's got all this science, this pseudo-science going on. And of course, you've got the backdrop, the new script for the one world religion, the Talmud. Okay? And all that's going on in the background. And this job, the job of the Bilderberg Steering Committee is to install this. So at the beginning of each year, they will call in those they need the most to move this. So you'll have certain editors, owners of, let's say, Reuters and APR, is it APS? Associated Press, AP, right? Rothschild both, to come in and they'll be told what they've to do for the year. Politicians, you get Paul, that's why certain politicians go, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and Kissinger's involved in this, of course, but as we get through this, we'll get to guts of who and what and how it serves a bit, I think. It says, the blueprint for absolute control of the bankrupt corporate governments yoked to the United Nations can be seen within this report. It must also be noted that Israel is calling for the dismantling of the United Nations to be replaced by a new governing body in the jurisdiction Admiralty and Maritime under no-hide laws centred in Israel. What this report brings to the fore is the platform upon which it has been built, Silent Weapons for a Quiet War, penned by the Royal Society with the authority taken from the Talmud. In England, it's been announced by the Church of England that it's considering filling the church steeples with power-hungry and radiation-transmitting mobile phone technology. They say to help coverage. What they do not explain is the fact that what is being suggested is the means to hide the outlet of the masts, which they know will cause serious controversy when the public realise what they are doing to the electromagnetic field in which they inhabit. Should we be concerned? And I wrote this in 2017. The deployment of this technology is being inserted on top of the existing mobile phone tech, but it is not the same as the existing platform. It is a subject that needs your attention. Because of the platform itself, which is made up of small cell antennas everywhere, they will launch an unnatural and round-the-clock milliwave and microwave radiation transmission that is far more potent than anything previously experienced from the man-made interference in the electromagnetic spectrum. The LED lighting, both in the home and on the street, also acts as an extension to the abilities of this tech. The US military use a millimeter wave 5G, which travel only short distance as a non-lethal weapon for crowd control, because the waves affect the surface of the body and cause the sensation akin to the burning of the skin. So they do use it for crowd control, and they have done quite a long time. What is the role of the Bilderberg Steering Committee when it invites corporate power to its annual meetings? The following report will shed some light on why the Bilderberg meeting is a pivotal part of the implementation of the plans of the global banking cartel. If we look to see the physical expression of attack on nations and the populations by the self-appointed elect, we can see a stranglehold on finance and trade to the control of currencies and credit. Both mechanisms having root in the outcome of the Crusades and could be said to be a very Templar affair. We are also in the midst of a script to promulgate threats between nations, ever moving to a two-part global division of East and West, with the focus to nuclear implosion. Well, we're in that now, aren't we? A paraphrase script to be found within the Bavarian Illuminati rantings and also within the Marxist drivel. But we must not forget that after the Third World War, it is the intent of the elect to thrust upon nations the greatest social catastrophe ever witnessed. It is with that in mind we must consider that the third global conflict is a quiet war. Quiet in the sense that the global populations are way behind in the information loop and are busy looking for a mechanical war, the consequences of which has been the public missing the reality of the technology war. Through the use of technologies riding on the back of accepted tech, such as satellite TV and the mobile phone networks, such weaponry remains hidden from the public. In turn, the corporate-sponsored media focus to the drama of East v West as the expected paradigm for the theatre of global conflict. We are also looking at financial catastrophe looming because the position now held by the elite financiers is one of they hold absolute power in the issuance of credit through the control of quantitative easing. Ergo, they can blow the system at whim while holding the game together through the immunities given to the banking cartel issued forth from the Financial Stability Board, a private NGO under command of the Bank for International Settlements. We are witnessing the monopolization of global assets in order they can initiate the perpetual war scenario presented by Orwell in his book 1984. Even history supports the above scenario that mankind is yet to face, seen in the presentation of Three World War Strategy written as a letter from Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini. Letters appear to be very important in moving the corporate script from the top down, a fact no different from the Balfour Declaration, from which the creation of what appears to be a total faked-up fantasy called Israel would be announced and then born in a letter from Rothschild to Balfour. In both cases, the letters are a clear example of a Zionist aim and therefore can be said to be a Jesuit Zionist concoction. But of course, now we're more aware of the Prussian side of things, aren't we? And that it's all this is just coming out of this massive Prussian military network, which pretty much controls everything now. The script also taps into the Hebrew traditions and the idea of futurism, said to have been crafted by the Society of Jesus and thrust into the Protestants via Freemasonry. The more one delves into the secret societies, the evidence that the Jesuits are in fact the Templars solidifies. This is a terrifying prospect when one considers that the original 9 Templars were in fact from the French Jewish elect and were in no way a Christian organisation. Just from the above information, one can feel a connection between the scenarios described and the methods known to be utilised by the secret society networks. In bringing together the information found in 2 separate documents, we find a coherent exposure of the secret and quiet war plans of the self-appointed elect of the globe. The first document was obtained from NASA website in July 2001 and is titled Future Strategic Issues, Future Warfare. It is a PowerPoint presentation created by Dennis M. Bushnell, Chief Scientist at NASA Langley Research Center. The second document is much older and was released in May 1979, titled Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, with other sources confirming that this policy was adopted by the international elites and was presented to the heights of the corporate empire at the first Bilderberg meeting in 1954 as the global script to be implemented. The first meeting was called by Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands had the power to veto the Vatican's choice of any pope it selected. So any pope that was being selected by the Vatican could be vetoed by this black nobility bigwig. And, you know, I don't know, I can't prove this, but when I used to look into the East Indias back in the day, it was pretty obvious to me that the Dutch East India was the power. When they actually moved over here after the Civil War and moved the Navy and the financial centre to the inner city, then what sort of the British Empire was burgeoning was really the same Prussian Empire just moved. So to hide the Dutch royalty in the background, then the British Empire went and such as like took over everything that the Dutch had done in colonisation, etc. And it was pretty clear to me that when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, in the secret society titles afforded, the Dutch royalty have been controlling the British royalty, or let's say the Prussians via the Dutch royalty have been in control of specifically Prince Philip through this current monarch's reign. So Prince Bernhard is very important in that respect because he's an exceptionally, or was an exceptionally powerful man of the black nobility. So that's your Venetians, who are ultimately Jewish. But as we sort of may bear fruit, the fact that if they are looking for this new heavenly Jerusalem, then we are dealing with those that claim to be but are not. So we have to also bear that in mind, because if you don't, you're just never going to get out of it, the mess. And it's the same for Jewish people. They need to reckon with this kind of stuff as well, because they've been pulled in by this, no different than anybody else. Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands had power to veto Vatican choice of any pope it's selected. This may explain the untimely end to the 33-day pontificate of Pope John Paul I. The veto was derived from the fact that his family, the Habsburgs, are direct descendants of the last Roman emperor, Frederick von Habsburg III. Frederick was the last emperor to be crowned in Rome, which is seen as the civil equivalent of the Pope's apostolic succession from St. Peter. Prince Bernhard was the leader of the Black families and claimed to be the descendant of the House of David through the Merovingian dynasty, a claim that was acknowledged to be valid by the Carolingian dynasty that supplanted them. That's the Merovingians. And they supplanted them a very long time ago. You know, Charlemagne and Charles Martel before him, they were Carolingians. You know, this is when everything that's afforded to the Merovingians and that trilogy, The Matrix, it falls foul of it as well. It's the Carolingians that have been doing that control the whole of the Roman Empire, not the Merovingians. You know, they were before all that, and they were just druids, basically, is what they were. He thus claimed to be related to Jesus, but of course, the simple truth is Prince Bernhard was related to the Khazars, and therefore he was himself a Gentile, because the Khazars are Gentiles. You've got to remember this. As a representative of the black nobility, Bernhard did not act alone, nor was he the chief of what is called the New Venetian Party of the North. And yet it can be suggested that the Dutch Royal House was in fact the hidden hand behind the British Empire, as the Dutch East India Company secured its camouflage via the new venture of commercial and naval power in the inner city of London. So it's just a shift, same people, but now because it's here, England's tied into it, Scotland, Wales, because it's centred here, and the numpties of our nations, played along with it. Now, the origins of the black nobility. It says the black nobility's origins in the oligarch families of Venice and Genoa, in and around northern Italy, who in the 12th century held the privileged monopoly trading rights, control over minting of gold for currency, and have secured the caliphates south of the steppe to its cause against Western Rome, after they opened the gates of Constantinople to the same. From this move would tie in the Arabs and Sunni Islam as a whole to the agenda of the black nobility, all right? Because the Venetians secured the entrance of the caliphates, which weren't Sunni Islamic at the time. I can't remember the name of the guy, but he took on the crescent moon of Sophia when they went into Constantinople, and then they converted to Sunni Islam. So these are more of your Mongol tribes back east that we're dealing with here, and these guys are the sword of the Venetians, and were for a very long time attacking Eastern Rome, which is Constantinople. So by the time we get to the 12th century, I mean, their power is just growing supremely. You know, it's massive. You know, they've got control of most of the monarchs of Europe. They've got full control of this new thing building in the east with the caliphates merging with Islam, the Arabs, the Persians. You've got all that going on now, but people forget that they were being controlled by these Venetians. The First Crusade from 1063 to 1123, they established the power of the Venetian black nobility and solidified the power of the wealthy ruling class, which has enabled the recruitment of the European landowners right down to the warriors in all nations to join the crusade. In 1171, the black nobility achieved complete control in Venice, when the appointment of the Doge was transferred to what was known as the Great Council, which consisted of members of the commercial aristocracy, inclusive of the infamous Medici clan. Venice has remained in their hands ever since, but the power and influence of the Venetian black nobility extends far beyond its borders, and today it's felt in every corner of the globe. Now, this is what the Committee of 300 is, basically. Now, it says related royal houses are the House of Bernadotte, they're Sweden, Bourbon, France, Braganza, Portugal, Grimaldi, Monaco, Welfs, that's Britain and Germany, Habsburgs in Austria, Hanover in Germany, Hohenzollern in Germany, Karađorđević in Yugoslavia, Liechtenstein, and they are the House of Liechtenstein, which is a very interesting. I mean, you talk about offshore. You want to have a look at Liechtenstein. If you wanted to secure your money, that's where they all send it. Believe me, that's where it's at. You'd really, if you're ever into that, you want to check out Liechtenstein. It's an amazing little piece of kit. The House of Nassau in Luxembourg, Oldenburg in Denmark, Orange in the Netherlands, Savoy in Italy, Wettin in Belgium. Now, the Wettins, they're a very powerful family. Wittelsbach in Germany, Württemberg in Germany, Zoga, Albania, and of course, all the families on the Windsor Tree. Now, that's only a tiny little thing, and I'm not seeing any what you'd class as Italian names there, because there's tons of them, and the ones with the real power are the ones that are pulled together, the Fondies. Now, it just gives you a bit of a definition of Nasa in Hebrew, which pretty much translates as to deceive. The enemy is humanity, it says. Document 1 is taken from the Third Reich scientist grouping that took up the contract with, which allowed them to escape Nazi Germany under Project Paperclip. Once established within the United States, became known as NASA. So NASA's basically the German scientists that were brought over under Paperclip, and has been ever since. The document gives insight into the mechanics of what the real Third World War agenda is, and how they intend to implement a many-faceted attack on all nations, politically, financially, militarily, medically, and through the use of technology. They want technocracy to replace the humans, which means they are to produce cyborgs and robots, each with a human brain. The intention is based entirely on the fraudulent climate change script as cause for such drastic action against the populations, when in real terms we are speaking of global contamination and weather modifications carried out by the very elites who have determined to blame the catastrophic environmental carnage on the idea of overpopulation. It will be thought that through the smart meter system, the energy will be allocated to the populations under a carbon credit scheme. Food will also be rationed. Well, you can see with this electronic currency, they're going to tell you what you can and can't buy. That's how ridiculous it is. We must also consider the three-pronged attack against the Western populations during the 20th century, continuing today. The first was the launch of jazz, which would shift into sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Subculture, which would shift the minds and hearts of the youth as a psychological attack. And the second would be the medical insertion of viruses and cancers directed to the populations. Well, not so much cancers, but the correct acids and such that would create those cancers, directed to the populations. And the third would be the many airborne biological attacks on the British and American populations by their own military and intelligence agencies from the air and from the coastlines. And this was during the 50s. They pretty much annihilated the south of England with the Navy and gave them all lung cancer through the 60s, 70s, and pretty much gone by the 80s. So that's my intro to this. Now, rather than actually go through the whole bloody thing, which could take forever, I have actually pulled out what I thought were interesting. So we might as well have a look at that. Now, the first document is the NASA document. So if you can see it there, but we don't have to look at that just yet. We can just read this. It says, on page 4 of the NASA doc, the premise for the presentation states that it is formed to incite thought and discussion, and is based in all cases upon existing data, trends, analysis, and technologies. And then it adds no pixie dust. So it's basically telling from the outset that everything it's going to discuss is existing. It's the existing analysis and the existing technologies, okay? And the trend data is also showing that it's moving forward. It is telling the reader that the presentation is based in real capabilities, no fiction, from which the plan is to be made manifest over the populations. Microdust as a weapon administered through aerosol spraying, today known as geoengineering, or chemtrails, and then inserted would be nanoparticles, which is a micron-sized mechanized dust distributed as an aerosol, which is then inhaled into the lungs. The dust mechanically bores into the lung tissue and executes various pathological missions. This is a new type of warfare, and under the corporate script is 100% legal. But I got into that a long time ago, and you get the distinct impression that although it's very, very valid to the game, the chemtrails are not as good as they would have liked or hoped in sort of getting this kind of stuff where they want it to go, because the winds just was it all over its shop. So as although they've been doing it and still doing it, I mean, today if you looked up there, especially this morning, they were spraying like you wouldn't believe, just to block out the blue sky and the sun. And it's been like this for months. They've been doing this now since November, non-stop, every day, spraying the living daylights out of you. You know, so that, you know, they do a lot of things with it. And of course, you know, they're throwing out all sorts of pathological garbage. It says frequencies will also be utilized in the Quiet War, administered through the smart tech grid, through the mobile networks, through digital TV, and through the police communication systems, and direct from satellites. Because when they were actually putting these police communication systems in, there were a lot of police having a lot of problems, and that's been kept quiet. And that were in the 90s through the early 2000s. So again, that's already been done. Low microwave frequencies will also be utilized, and this is tied to the report. Extremely low frequencies, ELF waves, up to 100 Hz, are once more naturally occurring. But they can also be produced artificially, such as for the Navy's Project Sanguine for submarines communication. ELF waves are not normally noticed by the unaided senses, yet their resonant effect upon the human body has been connected to both physiological disorders and emotional distortion. Infrasound vibration up to 20 Hz can be subliminally influence brain activity to align itself to delta, theta, alpha, or beta wave patterns, inclining an audience toward everything from alertness to passivity. So they can make you highly alert or make you very passive just by subliminal influence to the delta, theta, alpha, or beta wave patterns. So that brings in the carrier wave technology, which we'll have a look at the Lilly wave in a minute, because I've also got a report on that. Infrasound could be used tactically as ELF waves endure for great distances, and it could be used in conjunction with media broadcasts as well. So they can actually. So, well, we'll look at the Lilly wave, and I'll go through how they can do that. It's interesting and not too complex neither. And it says, see play for Gael and Hill Scott, The Cycles of Heaven, New York, St. Martin's Press, 1978, pages 130 to 140. You know, so you're in 70s here when they're playing with all this stuff. You know, a lot of people think chemtrail started in 90s. Did it? Heck, it's been going on since Vietnam. And before, Vietnam was the first use of it for warfare. See Forrest Gump. Now, document 2 is Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and it was put out in May 1979. It says document 2 has been around for some time and is well researched and dissected. It is. But when you add the two documents together, a fuller picture of the aims and methods of the Quiet War become exposed and can now be referenced in the technology expansion we witness today. The document begins with the following message to those chosen to be initiated into the plan. Welcome aboard. This publication marks the 25th anniversary of the Third World War, called the Quiet War, being conducted using subjective biological warfare fought with silent weapons. This book contains an introductory description of this war, its strategies, and its weaponry. And that's May 1979, #741120. The document then moves to explain the essence of a silent weapon. Descriptive introduction of the silent weapon. It says everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only in its own manner of functioning. So they're transferring the arts of war, same methods, same aims, but they're transferring those functions into this technological arena. Okay, so that's an interesting point to note as well. So anything that you've known they've done mechanical in the past, they've transferred that ability into this other method. It shoots situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of chemical reaction or explosion. It says originating from bits of data instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate instead of a military general. Right? So that's how they've transferred the mechanics of war into this system, which nobody's concerned with because they're all obsessed with the Ukraine and the shit show. Yeah, you really don't want to be believing any bollocks that's coming out of that. I'm telling you now, it's absolute pish, shit, garbage. You know, it's amazing how when they've run out of something, all of a sudden they come out with something even more bizarre and gets lapped up. It's just ridiculous. Get that television turned off, honestly. It says, with the election of Donald Trump, we are today better informed as to how this became possible against the might of the Zionist left and its groupthink. We understand it is so due to the actions of Robert Mercer. Right, now, let me just backtrack there, because it says, doesn't it, it shoots situations instead of bullets, but more importantly, it says that that's propelled by data processing. Okay, so they're replacing bullets by situations, and that ability is gained by processing data. Now, Robert Mercer, interesting. I've done a report about him. I'll put this up. He was the man that saved Trump's flagging run for president. He did very well at the beginning, and then it started to flag. And in came Robert Mercer with the buzzwords that ended up getting Trump elected, which was "Make America Great Again," amongst others, which I forget offhand right now. But what had been going on since like 2008, or whenever Facebook and these big platforms were created, the data that they were collecting in relation to what Americans were saying in their own conversations birthed for them certain phrases that were what people were saying of their own fruition. And "Make America Great Again" was one of them. It was the main one. So in came Robert Mercer with cash and these phrases, and that reinvigorated Trump, and he won. He won. So there we can see that the bullets that they used to send in war is now situations, and the Trump was the man to show you that you weren't just a normal American, that you were right wing. You were part of this right wing, and you were pitted against the left wing. Whereas in general, as it was, everybody that was saying were pitted against these dick stains anyway, you know, but now they've transferred that and we said, you've got to be right. Well, a lot of people are not going to want to be right, and just as much as they don't want to be seen as left. Who the fuck are them? That's what they've just, so they've divided it, and you lot are still left. So we can see that's how they've done it, you know, brilliant, in fact. Now, in this man, we can reference the above explanation of the silent weapon as now being played and operated to shift the public opinion for elections and the same for corporate leaders when deciding global trade and other actions. through the control of data and the ability to install such within the realm of cyberspace. So they make it become your language, what you're talking about. Tailored advertising for the correct responses based on your electronic footprint, which Google and Facebook handed to a company run by Mercer's sidekick, Steve Bannon, called Cambridge Analytica. So it's situations that they throw at you, like they've just done for the last 2 years. Throw a situation at you, shit yourself, bent over, led down, yeah? I'm surprised your anus is not absolutely really sore in this last 2 years. But I tell you, I've been bummed. But you know what I'm saying? You know, they're throwing situations at you that are complete bullshit. Like these fake shootings, these fake nonsense. It's fake. It's a situation. Bang, they shot it. You go getting it through the telly. Yeah, can you see how they've just so expanded their abilities there? One bullet, one man. Now it's one situation. Billions of people get sucked into it. And Ukraine is no different. It's no different. Yeah. And so originally when I began with the Nagas, could very well be another one of those very well crafted diversions. Yeah, it could be. But when you look into the symbolism of the data that they've brought out, and then apply that to Moses, specifically Moses' rod and the rod of Aaron and the Pharaoh's rod, where they were, you see, when you get into symbolism of this, it's just the words. I mean, I was going to do it tonight, but honestly, I didn't get a chance to just recap. I'm not going to ruin it because I might make a mess of it if I try it now. But basically, you have to look at the word splitting. So splitting the Red Sea, blood. They were using venom to split the DNA, which is the way they achieved to get a new mRNA code that they've created in your DNA. It all starts to make sense. However, as I said, the evidence missing, which is the most important, is the fact that they have actually found this PLA2 in any of the food, the water, the air, or indeed the shot. So it's not confirmed. The data, the script, the narrative, the context is brilliant. If it rings true, it's fantastic in the sense that it's all treatable. All of it is treatable because it's the Viper. We'll say no more. In the world of finance and economics, the document explains how Mayer Amschel Rothschild applied his strategy to disable global trade as a capitalist and private endeavor and shifted the lot into monopoly. The document says, today's silent weapons technology is an outgrowth of a simple idea discovered, succinctly expressed and effectively applied by Mr. Mayer Amschel Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild discovered the missing passive component of economic theory known as economic inductance. He, of course, did not think of this discovery in these 20th century terms. And to be sure, mathematical analysis had to wait for the second industrial revolution, the rise of the theory of mechanics and electronics, and finally the invention of the electronic computer, before it can be effectively applied in the control of the world economy. The following video, all right, so that video has been removed, so I don't know what that video is actually. So that's basically my intro. Now we get into these documents. So we get to the first one, we'll just flick through it. So I'm on page 2 there, and capabilities of the enemy after next ongoing worldwide technological revolutions, economic trends, potential nature of father-term warfare. Page 3, it's bots, Borgs, and humans. Welcome you to 2025 AD. So this is 2001 document, but they're talking about post 2025, which is when they intend to have achieved it. It says this presentation is based on futures work for and with US Air Force, National Research Council, Army, ACOM, SSG, Australian DoD, NRO, DSB, DARPA, DIA, CIA, APL, SEALs, ONI, FBI, NSAP, SOCOM, MSIC, TRADOC, QDR, JWAC, NAIAC, JFCOM, TACOM, SACLANT, and whatever. A lot of big nonsense stuff, not just in America, but Australia is really tied into this, which would appear to be because when they ceased doing all the nuclear testing in America, they shifted it all into the outback many, many years ago, and Pine Gap, of course, seems to be the centre of that network running it. So there's no surprise that you're finding Australia specifically tied in with the US military. It says this presentation is meant to incite thought discussion. It's based in all cases upon existing technology. We've gone through that. Provides in some cases a somewhat broader view of prospective developments and issues. Utilization applications, projections, inputs to future warfighting concepts, developments, enemy after next and blue, inputs to new procurement decision, heads up for intel community, watches and warnings, inputs to DoD and R&D planning. So it might just be NASA blah blah, but this has been like a Bible for these big organizations for a long time. Well, definitely since 2001. Going in assumptions, politics does change overnight. Russia, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan. Potential capabilities is the future warfare issue, not who, but what. Need to plan differently. World is in the throes of triple exponential IT, bio, nanotechnological revolutions. Changes occurring at scales of months instead of decades, and zeroth order potential effects upon defense, offense equipment, and threats. The crew are plundering the ship's supplies, tinkering with the temperature and life support controls. Now then, so you've got to get this. Because it sounds flippant, but this is really giving it, and it says Spaceship Earth. The crew are plundering the ship's supplies, tinkering with the temperature and life support controls. That's your geoengineering, folks. Now, when it says plundering the ship's supplies, this is Spaceship Earth. So they're wrecking the supply chain, which they're doing, our ability to feed ourselves. Yeah. It says still looking for the instruction manual, engaging in bloody skirmishes in every corner of the vessel, increasing the size of the crew by 2 million per week. So he's getting you to join in. Jump on board. And this is from 2001, remember. So this is all after Blur and Brain got stuck in with. Humans have taken over and vastly shortened evolution. Yeah, humans. Remember that. Off the planet. Global warming, pollution, deforestation, huge public work, e.g. Three Gorges Dam. Of the planet, not off the planet. My apologies. You'd have UFO buffs thinking I'm into spaceships. Of the human species, genomic design and repair, mind, children, Moravec. Product, life forms, cross species, molecular breeding, directed evolution, and that's Maxigen, etc. So there is talk in Ukraine that they've been breeding cross species, all set up by Obama. Remember all them labs, and Biden. Order of 70% of world's research. So currently, they are order of 70% of world's research conducted outside the US. To first order, a percent of GDP US produces order of 80% of world's GDP. That's a lot. Order of 70% of US research now commercial as opposed to government sponsored. So governments are out of the mix. Nanotechnology research, Europe, Japan, the US, and 29% is being done in Europe. Now then. Nanotechnology, 29% of it's being done in Europe. However, Israel classes itself as Europe, doesn't it? That's why it's in the Eurovision. It's not, I don't like it. 28% in Japan and 20% in the US and 16% in others. Technological ages of humankind. Hunter killer groups, million BC, 10K BC. I don't know what that means exactly. Agriculture, 10K. Oh, right. No. Technological age you got. Yeah. Hunter killer groups, million BC, 10K BC. Agricultural groups, 10K BC, 1800 AD. Industrial from 1800 to 1950, and IT from 1950 to 2020. By nano, so that's biological nano, 2020 onwards, and then virtual. Clever. So yeah, we're only in bio nano at minute. Then we've got the virtual game, whatever that. God's sake, don't even think about it. Hunter-gatherer was nature provided. Agriculture was controlled nature and plants and animals. Industrial was mechanized agriculture. IT bio nano is automating industry agriculture. So that's what they're doing to you farmers, guys. You're coming under what you're going through now is this IT bio nano automating your industry. Yeah. So that's what you guys need to fight in, really. And stop contracting with these bum faces. And then virtual is the rebotization of IT bio nano industry agriculture. So that's GMO, completely manufactured synthetic foods from agriculture in all its forms. Ugh! Yuck. I'm glad I'm 22 and not a youngster. Key future technologies, all highly synergistic at the frontiers of the small in a feeding frenzy off each other. Silicon biooptical, let me just make that bigger. Silicon virtual reality holographic. Oh, wait a minute. IT, right, so the key future. So in IT, silicon biooptical quantum nanocomputing, no end in sight, another 10, whatever. Virtual reality, holographic, immersive, ubiquitous comms, hyperspectral sensors, virtual presence, automatic robot everything, huge cost reductions. Did you see that virtual reality holographic? Remember that when they started throwing out this faked alien shit, which it looks like they might be preempting with this military have gone into some of the national parks in America on the back of these missing people, these strange sightings and creatures. Not to suggest there isn't any, but something's going on. Biological technologies, the future, lifespan doubling, genetic engineering before birth. Did you get that? Genetic engineering before birth. Plants irrigated by seawater. That's food, petrochem food, stock minerals, and terraformings. And in the nanotechnologies arena, carbon nanotubes, 600 times strength to weight of steel. Assemblers live in factories, huge cost reductions. So these are the plans, and this was put out in 2001. Worldwide IT revolution. Comms, computing, sensors, electronics, US commercial IT R&D. 100 billion a year that's getting. Factor of 1 million further improvement, silicon, molecular, quantum, bio-optical. Beyond human AI, automatic robots in the large. Have you seen some of these robots that they've got going for military? We won't need a military in a bit. Immersive multisensory VR holodecks. Ooh, well, they're on with that, aren't they? These things on where you feel like you're there. Ubiquitous multi-physics hyperspectral sensors, land, sea, and airspace. Hyperspectral sensors. So this is your Internet of Things. This is your LED lights everywhere. These towers, these wires they're putting out and connecting to your ass. So that's land, sea, and airspace. Ubiquitous multi-physics hyperspectral sensors. Micro nano. Well, ubiquitous is essential, isn't it? Obvious kind of. Micro nano SATs, GNC sensors, etc. Well, that's your ID, innit, that they've just shot into you, a lot of you. Worldwide impacts on ongoing IT revolution upon society: telecommuting, teleshopping, tele-entertainment, teletravel, tele-education, telemedicine, telecommerce, telepolitics, telesocialization. There you go, kids. All tele. You're not going out at this. Lockdown, Birmingham. IT starters. 10E6 improvements on computing since 59. 10E8 further possible next 30 years. 10E3 provides better than human capabilities. 100 million telecommuters worldwide now expected to at least double in 15 years. So they've done it then, because we're past the 15 years. India graduates 3 times more software engineers than the US. So that's the plan. You see, this is the thing. If they're moving this new system and you don't understand it, you're a beggar. Do you know what I'm saying? This is the game they're playing. Yeah, I mean, we should now get to a point where eugenics, we're sussing out IT experts at birth and shooting them. Of course, I'm only joking. Don't be going out looking for IT experts as babies. But they're the guys pushing this in because they're stupid. They've no soul. They're just left brain. Think about it, guys. What you're actually creating for your offspring, because you'll not be needed at some point. You're the programmer. You're putting it in once it's got its own life. What do they need you for? You're going to become very dangerous because you know too much. Just look at the 80s and all the scientists that were bumped off, especially with car crashes and helicopter crashes and plane crashes, because they knew too much. Some IT predictions. Quantum computing initially available in 5 years, so that would have been 2006. 15% of all power today is used by computers. Wow. And it will reach 60% by 2010. So whatever electric's going up to pay for 60% of all use, which is being done by computers. And that's your outside internet stuff, these towers and pish. The military applications to everything, 60% by 2010. 2022. Wearable, implantable, on-person electronics, comms, computing, sensory augmentation, health monitoring, and brain stimulation. Well, you're all running around with them fucking spastic things on your arms when you're running. Well, what are you playing? What is going on? So you're doing it for them. Well done. AI and beyond computing. Human brain characteristics, capabilities, 100 billion neurons, 1 trillion connections, 200 calculations a second slow speed of neural circuitry, 20 million billion calculations a second, excellent at parallel computing, pattern recognition, poor at sequential thinking, operates via random tries. Machine capabilities, currently 10,000 billion calculations a second, 100,000 billion by 2004. So 2004, they were in 2010, 20 million billion is available. By 2025 on a PC. And by 2030, PC has collective computing power of a town full of human minds. You're 2030. You can see why they've run for that. So basically, you can get a gist if you want to carry on reading that, what they're up to here. But now, so I'll tell you what, we'll have a look at this Lilly wave because it just explains to you, because a lot of people can't get a grip of how they can use the television to actually throw out subliminals. So I'll just come back to you lot. Oh shit. I should have done that. Where am I? Okay, so I'll just slap you that up and then I'll have a little look at what you're talking about. Very much like computer program, bloody clever to be firm. They'd bomb hack you for all the spies. Well, they're not as good as they used to be, Ray. And welcome back. How are you doing? I noticed you've been getting rid of the rubbish in the background over the weeks. Thank you very much for that. 1954, year after Lizzie the pirate was crowned. It's all this to collapse currencies and to introduce CBDCs. Evening all Tony. Prince was investigating chemtrails for his death. It was. I'm not sure that Prince was a good boy, really. There's a lot of interesting facts on chemtrails. Yeah, he did put out a lot, but he was also a Jehovah's Witness. Professor Martin Powell has done a lot of work on the effects of EMF on the body. I don't think I've heard of that guy. Thanks, Area. Don't forget to use the pointy end. Look at the experiments with frequencies and water. Yeah. Are you aware that the new poles with cameras also have audio capabilities? Not only are you being watched. Well, do you know what? Yeah, I am aware of it, and I'm also aware of it that it's in the shop CCTVs as well. So pretty much wherever you go these days, they can. I mean, when I used to go Costa Rica, there's a camera right across. We're always having a good nosy. And then you could see them. They're so obvious when you know what they do. Anyway, everyday spraying chemtrails. Oh yeah, are they not? But I. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just spell it. This guy's again. So, Andrea Fallon, you're saying you use distilled white vinegar. Have you got data on that? Because it's not something I've heard about before. Yeah, Cambridge Analytica is an important thing. I wrote one of the first to push out that data back then, and about 3 weeks after, The Guardian did a huge data dump. Quite interesting that the attention that report got when I put that up. That would just come out of nowhere for me. And I'll tell you what helped me a lot. Little Sis. The Little Sis network, amazing. If you want data, just get into that. Everybody dumps data on there. It's amazing what stuff you can find out on there. And that's how I got into Little Sis, putting that report together. Right. Well, that's very interesting to know. Do you have a link to that video that you can put up here, Andrea? As I understand it, Ray, RNA is the message, isn't it? It holds the code. And that's what it puts it to the DNA, which then uses the code. Now, interesting in this PLA2 data that I were seeking out over this weekend, the toxins of a particular cobra has 139 toxins in its venom, 19 of which are specifically to attack the organs of its prey. And the two scientists that come up with the mRNA tech, provable, you can see this, we've been funded using this cobra's venom to split the DNA in order to insert a code. So all the data that I achieved, it panned out. None of that can be argued because it panned out. What didn't pan out, the fact that we're working on here, the hearsay that a first group of scientists in the February of 2020 looked at the I'm not sure what they looked at with it, but the second bunch, the French bunch in April, specifically looked at what they call the spike protein and say that they found this, but there is no evidence of these guys presenting that, either video or paper that I can find. But as I've said, I mean, as we've gone through these Herbal at the end of each live stream in these last few weeks, quite a lot of them are already set to counteract venom. So if it is the case that this is what they've done, it's all treatable. All of it. With all the things the fact checkers won't let you look at that we know about. But also we're going through these herbs and they're showing us that a lot of these herbs are brilliant for counteracting the effects of this basically reptile genetic being put inside you. And again, if that's the case, like I've always said, it shows up this reptilian push by certain quarters as a take on the reality of the old symbolism in the doctrines, and created it in, turned it into a fantasy. So we need to keep it. It could be interesting if this just pans out to be right, because more importantly, because it's treatable. It's treatable. The end of the panic. If you've done the deed, you can treat it. It will be interesting in 3 generations. I'm waiting to see what's going on by next time we get to autumn. I mean, a lot of people I know have done the deeds. You look at them and they look like they're constantly expelling shit. Their faces look like teenagers, like they've got teenage spots, with piss and pus coming out like they do with some dirty teenagers. And they look like that. The body's trying to get rid of all this shit. They've got the mask on. He's like, yeah, go on, lad. Pass out, for God's sake. And they'll take you away and kill you in them hospitals. Changa mushrooms. Yeah, well, I do mushrooms in my stir fries, different ones. Brilliant. They all have a different thing. I mean, I did get into mushrooms at one point in trying to study them, but there's billions of them. I just thought to myself, I wouldn't trust myself picking them, because knowing me, I'd pick. There is a basic premise as to which are poison and which aren't. If they don't have fins underneath, they're smooth. Don't risk it. That's what I'm. But there's so many of them. It take a lifetime to understand the mushroom. There is one particular mushroom I know well. Right, it's a naughty one. But if you do it correctly, you can dream quest all day with that stuff. But you have to be extra careful. Not everything that's coming through is beneficial, let's say. Go to Alison McDowell's YouTube channel for succinct explanation of the whole plan in detail. Can you put a link up to that one, my good man? Because obviously these chat comes up later, and obviously people watching it, if you put a link up to the video you're talking about, they can go and have a look. It's all about moving info and data. That's what it's about. RNA is a sort of copy and paste on DNA and RNA, constant monitoring from molecules. And our friends can hold up body DNA, it cuts it out and replaces it with the great DNA. Right. Thanks for that, Ray. Right, back to so the Lilly wave. This I put into November 2015, but I have expanded it. But it was very succinct in its original format. But it'll help you grasp how they use this technology as a carrier wave, and that they can put something on to. It says the Lilly wave was found by John C. Lilly and is, in most cases, completely misunderstood as to its usage to affect the thoughts and behavior of humans. It is described as a biphasic electric pulse which stimulates the neurons of the brain to resonate at a certain frequency. Thus, the Lilly wave has the ability to control the brainwave patterns of the brain. There is, however, a far more advanced form and largely unknown and suppressed purpose in the use of the Lilly wave. The water molecules within the brain can be made to resonate at a desired frequency. This causes the electrons that comprise the brain's electrical voltages to also resonate at the same frequency. Now, this is why music's so important. Music in its entirety is doing this to you, which is why it's so important you get to grips with what it is you allow yourself to pull into yourself, because it's changing your water molecules to resonate at that frequency. It is not a requirement, as is understood by the majority of science, to implant electrodes to cause the brain's water molecules to be entrained to a certain frequency. It can also be accomplished by any waveform that can penetrate the skull and then cause the entrainment of the brain's water molecules. For example, radio waves emitted at a frequency of 40 Hz, targeted at a person's brain, will entrain the water molecules to a degree of 48 cent, and thus the rest of the brain's electrons will also resonate at that frequency. So can you see why they've shifted off solfeggio notes? They're determining what that music does to your water. Yeah, your water molecules. This is why it's really important what music you let yourself listen to. Because whether you like it or not, your water molecules resonate with it. You take it on. Which is why your mums out there are into Miley Cyrus and you let the kids watch it. You know, it's got you. Step back and recognise what it is that's got you. Same for chimp music, you know. You know, they put garbage on a brilliant rhythm. That's how it gets you. You're up to the rhythm, the music, but it's the garbage shit that you put in your mind. In this manner, it's possible to stimulate and control the brain's wave patterns remotely with all the electromagnetism and also acoustic waves, yeah, music. So they can do it through music, but they can also do it with electromagnetism. However, it is imperative to understand that if the wave is not biphasic, it will result in damage to the brain's neurons and cause what is termed brain damage. So they can flick of a switch with this stuff. Once they get this system in, just a flick of a switch and they can cause serious problems. It is not the case that, which is the quiet war intent, yet they're going to kill the populations not by nuclear conflagration, according to their own data. They want to destroy the populations through being able to change your emotional state, how you're thinking, violence, riot, whatever you want. You know, LA riots, this claim, was a test of this technology. That's the intent. So while you're focused over there, they're building this system and mechanic to actually get rid of the global population. So if you're a Muslim fighting this war you've got going on, or a Zionist fighting, or a Christian, you're a dick. Because that's not where it's at. That's where they want you at while they put this in. And then it doesn't matter what religion you are, how many times you pray, or whatever, you're going to get zapped. Your kids are going to get zapped. Grandma and granddad, if they're still alive, are going to get zapped. Dog, cat, bird, the lot. It is not the case that only the brain's water molecules can be entrained. It is also true that the blood sugar, iron within the cellular structure composing the neurons of the brain and various other elements, can also be entrained to resonate at a desired frequency. And possibly, in brackets, the reason for the attack on tobacco and nicotine, because nicotine is a super blood regulator. That is correct. There is no other thing they can find other than nicotine that regulates the blood sugar so well. And in the same way that very few smokers actually end up with lung cancer, because the onslaught of the smoke and all that goes with it has encouraged the DNA of the smoker to shift, which means it doesn't become cancerous. You know what I'm saying? It's and you know there's studies on that. Of course, I'm not suggesting you all go out and start smoking, but I'm just stating facts here. Very few people that smoke actually end up with lung cancer. Emphysema, yeah, all that kind of stuff. But lung cancer, it's very rare. It does happen, but it's rare. If a molecule is targeted by a wave that resonates at the same frequency as that molecule will explode. Sugar is a crystal, and crystals, when stressed, broken, or deformed, release an electric and electromagnetic charge. This is known as triboluminescence. Big word, big word. The effect of exploding sugar crystal is quite damaging to the mind and brain. It creates extreme confusion, dizziness, and also a state best described as lack of awareness or apathy. The Lilly wave frequency is a secret military application. It is known as the madness frequency. The Los Angeles riots are said to have been the first open test of its capacity to mass control anger and violent response from the mob. However, doesn't look like that's the case with Rwanda. It would appear was the first test of this ability to create massive anger and violent response. Furthermore, there are other profound effects of entraining the brain and blood's iron molecules, one of which is to cause the iron to condense together via resonant attraction and dump within the brain. This has the effect of causing the iron to be magnetized and rush to the top of your head, resulting in a rush of blood to the head and extreme confusion and dizziness. It can also be reversed, which causes a draining of blood from the head, leading to all-out unconsciousness. In short, the Lilly wave is best described as a targeted resonance of the brain's molecules. Use of Lilly wave can pretty much install any brainwave pattern into the mind of any targeted human, such as the negative aspects already mentioned, and also to create happiness or the ability to control one's physical movements. An attack direct to the water molecule is by far the best method to achieve the desired aims. Now, see, I'm trying to find. Right. So, as already stated, the Lilly wave was found by Dr. John Lilly when he was working for NIH, the National Institute for Health, in 1959, when they first started implementing dolphin brains and discovered that they needed to give the dolphin brain a chance to respond. Then they discovered that they could use the same waves on human beings. He was doing work for the Navy at the time, and he got out of that research because he felt so conflicted about what they were doing. The Lilly wave frequency will mostly be an extremely low and sometimes an ultra low frequency range, but they are complicated as they need to interact with certain brain molecules which have a resonant frequency of their own. And of course, chimp music is all about ultra low frequency range, yeah, dance music as well. You got to keep this in mind, people, because this is being used against you, you know. It is strange that the ELF and ULF ranges are classified, or 10 MHz control frequencies. So when it gets down to that, it's classified. You can't, you know, you're not finding info because they're using it. Artificial thought and communication. This is the third step in the Blue Beam project that goes along with the telepathic and electronically augmented two-way communication, where ELF, VLF, and LF waves will reach each person from within his or her own mind. From the smart grid technology, convincing each of them that their own God is speaking to them from the very depths of their own soul. Such rays from satellites are fed from the memories of computers that have stored massive data on every human on Earth and the languages. The rays will then interlace with their natural thinking to form what we call diffuse artificial thought. That kind of technology goes into the 70s, 80s, and 90s research where the human brain has been compared to a computer. Information is fed in, processed, integrated, and then a response is formulated and acted upon. Mind controllers manipulate information the same way a computer for grammar manipulates information. In January 1991, the University of Arizona hosted a conference entitled the NATO Advanced Research Workshop on Current and Emergent Phenomena and Biomolecular Systems. Now then. So basically, how they use this Lilly wave to change the water molecules. So that's again a part of this quiet wars that they've been using for a long time. So yeah, let's have a look now. It says security. It is patently impossible. So we're back on the top secret silent weapons for quiet wars document. My apologies. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of society and the engineering of social automation and silent weapons on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, slavery, and genocide. So they don't really talk about it. Otherwise, you'll say the game. This manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Ooh, did you get that? This manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny, otherwise it might be recognised as a technically formal declaration of domestic war, which it is. Furthermore, whenever any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodologies for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or group of persons and the public. See, we don't use this declaration of war and intent correctly. And we should. I think we need to start looking at that, because this is exactly what they're doing. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. Historical introduction of silent weapon technologies evolved from operation research or and strategic and tactical methodology developed under the military and management in England. Page 2, World War II. Ooh. The original purpose of operating research was to study the strategic and tactical problems of the air and land defence, with the objective of effective use of limited military resources against foreign enemies or logistics. It was soon recognised by those in positions of power that the same methods might be useful for totally controlling a society, but better tools were necessary. Social engineering, the analysis of automation of society, requires the correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information or data. So a high-speed computerized data processing system was necessary, which could race ahead of society and predict when society would arrive for capitulation, which is now. Relay computers were too slow, but the electric computer invented in 1946 by J. Prescott Eckert and John W. Moseley filled the bill. So this is 1946 when they created a computer that would work for them to start to do this stuff, work it out. The next breakthrough was the development of the simplex method of linear programming in 1947 by the mathematician George B. Dantzig. Then in 1948, the transistor invented by J. Bardeen and W. H. Brattain and W. Shockley promised great expansion of the computer field by reducing space and power requirements. With these three inventions under their direction, those in positions of power strongly suspected that it was possible for them to control the whole world with the push of a button. Immediately, the Rockefeller Foundation got in on the ground floor by making a 4-year grant to Harvard College, funding the Harvard Economic Research Project for the study of the structure of the American economy. 1 year later, in 1949, the United States Air Force joined in. In 1952, the grant period terminated and a high-level meeting of the elite was held to determine the next phase of social operations research. The Harvard project had been very fruitful, as is borne out by the publication of some of its results in 1953, suggesting a feasibility in economic social engineering, or rather the feasibility of economic and social engineering. Engineered in the last half of the decade of the 1940s, the new quiet war machine stood, so to speak, in sparkling gold-plated hardware on the showroom floor by 1954. With the creation of the Maser in 1954, the promise of unlocking unlimited sources, fusion atomic energy from the heavy hydrogen in seawater, and the consequent availability of unlimited social power was a possibility only decades away. The combination was irresistible. Although the silent weapons system was nearly exposed 13 years later, the evolution of the new weapon system has never suffered any major setbacks. This volume marks, so 53, that was 63, 66. Oh, so you're going to be talking Kennedy. Fuck, shit, nearly exposed 13 years later. This is Kennedy stuff. Shit, man. No wonder they killed him. This volume marks the 25th anniversary of the beginning of the Quiet War. Already, this domestic war has had many victories on many fronts throughout the world. Political introduction. In 1954, it was well recognized by those in positions of authority that it was only a matter of time and only a few decades, and this is Bilderberg, before the general public would be able to grasp and upset the cradle of power. You see, it's all been about this grand awakening that is actually going on because of the astrological stuff. They knew back in the day that there was going to come a time when people are going to be able to wake up and fight this nonsense. So this is why they've annihilated you with 3 world wars, all the toxins by whatever method to get you to the point where you all stay in your house. Yeah. You know, they've got it for the very elements So it says it's only a few decades before the general public would be able to grasp and upset the cradle of power. For the very elements of the new silent weapons technology were as accessible for public utopia as they were for providing a private utopia. The issue of primary concern, that of dominance, revolved around the subject of the energy sciences. Okay, dominance through energy. Yeah, now they're taking it away because of climate. Energy. Energy is recognised as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy, and social science, theoretically expressed as economics. And it is the study of the sources and control of social energy. Both are bookkeeping systems, mathematics. Therefore, mathematics is the primary energy science, and the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the mythology of the bookkeeping. Yeah, your taxation of your fining your own person. Yeah, all science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge, the end is control. Beyond this remains only one issue: who will be the beneficiary? In 1954, that was the issue of primary concern. Although the so-called moral issues were raised in view of the law of natural selection, it was agreed that a nation or world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have an intelligence. Such people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and consent. Consequently, in the interest of future world order, peace and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of the permanent shifting the natural and social energy or wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible many into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible and worthy few. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create secure and apply new weapons, which, as it turned out, were a class of weapons so subtle and so sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn for themselves the name silent weapons. The concept was never more than a questionable theory of elitist Charles Darwin. In conclusion, the objectives of economic research as conducted by the magnates of capital, banking and the industries of commodities, goods and services is the establishment of an economy which is totally predictable and manipulatable. In order to achieve a total predictable economy, the low-class elements of society must be brought under total control, i.e. must be housebroken, trained and assigned a yoke and long-term social duties from a very early age, before they have an opportunity to question the propriety of the matter. In order to achieve such conformity, the lower-class family units must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and establishment of government-operated daycare centres for the occupationally orphaned children. The quality of education given to the lower classes must be of the poorest sort, so that the mote of ignorance isolating the inferior class from the superior class is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. That's your legal system, your law, and biblical doctrine. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain more measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper classes. Do you get that? There you go. These ruling tossbags. This is their game, and it's against you, your kids, everything. It's against the whole show. Now, we don't need to move any further on that because you can read this document for yourself if you so wish. But the question originally at the beginning of this was, have we had the Third World War? Has the Third World War been? And what we're now looking at is this global social catastrophe, which to me, that's what it looks like they're exactly doing, Right. As is the usual, let's get on to something that's groovy and will help us. And we'll do a couple of the Culpepper's English Physicians Herbal Remedies. So it says, we've got now Amara dulcis. Considering that the diverse shires in this nation give diverse names to one and the same herb, and that the common name which it bears in one country is not known in another, I shall take the pains to set down all the names that I know of each herb, Pardon me for setting that name first, which is most common to myself, besides Amara dulcis. Some call it moral, others bittersweet, some wood nightshade, and others felonwort. Description: it grows up in the woody stalks even to a man's height, and sometimes higher. The leaves fall off at the approach of winter and spring out of the same stalk again at springtime. The branch is encompassed about with a whitish bark and have pith in the middle of it. The main branch spreadeth itself out into many small ones with claspers, laying hold on what is next to them, as vines do. It bears many leaves. They grow in no order at all, or at least in no vulgar order. The leaves are longish, though somewhat broad and pointed at the ends. Many of them have two little leaves growing at the end of their footstalks. Some of them have but one, and some none. The leaves are of a pale green colour. The flowers are of a purple colour, or of a perfect blue, like to violets. And they stand many of them together in knots, and berries are green at first, but when they are ripe, they are very red. I think that should be but. But when they are ripe, they are very red. If you taste them, you shall find them just as the crabs, which V.E. Sussex called bittersweet, viz. Sweet at first and bitter afterwards. Place: they grow commonly almost throughout England, especially in moist and shady places. Time: the leaves shoot out about the latter end of March, if the temperatures of the year be ordinary. It flowereth in July, and the seeds are ripe soon after, usually in the next month. Government and virtues: it is under the planet Mercury, and a notable herb is also of it also. I don't know what that is. If it be rightly gathered under this influence, it is excellent good to remove witchcraft. So you've got to look at the Mercury. Yeah, I think it's of the moon as well. Actually, this, if I remember right, that seems to be missing. I'll have to double check. So if it be rightly gathered under his influence, so under Mercury's influence, it's excellent good to remove witchcraft, both in men and beasts. It also all of a sudden diseases. And also all sudden diseases whatsoever. So if something comes on you quick, Amor Dulcis is the game. And it's mercurial. If you gather it under Mercury's rules, this can be used to kick off witchcraft and such like. Okay, so that's interesting to keep in mind. Is there any of you ladies of nature out there? Where are we? Being tied about the neck, it is one of the most admirable remedies for the vertigo or dizziness in the head. And that is the reason, as Tragus saith, that people in Germany commonly hang it about their cattle's neck when they fear any such evil as betided them. Country people commonly use it to take the berries of it, and having bruised them, they apply them to don't know what that is. Thereby soon rid their fingers of such troublesome guests. You apply them to something. I'll have it written on the report that I've now got on site. So this can be I've got this on site now. You can download the original, and I'm also putting these translations in as well, so that it makes it a bit easier. Now we have shown you the external use of the herb, we shall speak a word or two of the internal, and so conclude. It doesn't look like I've gone through this one. Take notice that it is a mercurial herb, and therefore of a very subtle part, as indeed all mercurial plants are. Therefore, take a pound of the wood and leaves together, bruise the wood, which you may easily do, for it is not hard as oak. Then put it in a pot and put it to 3 pints of white wine. Put on the pot lid and shut it close. Then let it infuse hot over a gentle fire 12 hours. Then strain it out, for you have so you have a most excellent drink to open obstructions of the liver and spleen, to help difficulty of breath, bruises, and falls and congealed blood in any part of the body. So if the Nagas is correct, this is another belter to attack that because it's come on you sudden. So this has to be collected under Mercury. But it'll wreck you of liver and spleen obstructions. And if you've got lung, obviously, problems here, it's saying it'll sort that out. This looks like the perfect antidote if it turns out to be as we discussed. And also yellow jaundice, the dropsy and black jaundice, and to cleanse women newly brought to bed. Cleanse women newly brought to bed. Is that a nice way of being a bit rude and talking about someone else? I don't know. I mean, is it just me? It might be just me then. You may drink a quarter of a pint of the infusion every morning. It purgeth the body very gently and not churlishly, as some hold. And when you find good by this, remember me. Ooh, that sounds like a super duper, doesn't it? Yeah. Amara dulcis, or moral, bittersweet, wood nightshade, or felonwort. That's the other names for it. How about that one, geezers and geezesses? So the next one is agrimony. Description. This of diverse long leaves, some greater, some smaller, set upon a stalk, all of them dented about the edges, green above and greyish underneath, and a little hairy withal, among which writheth up usually but one strong, round, hairy brown stalk, 2 or 3 feet high, with smaller leaves set here and there upon it, at the top whereof grow many yellow flowers, one above the other in long spikes, which after come rough heads of seeds hanging downwards, which will cleave to and stick upon garments or anything that shall rub against them. The root is black, long, and somewhat woody, abiding many years, and shooteth afresh every spring, which root through small hath a pleasant smell. So it has a pleasant smell, the root. Place. It grows upon banks near the sides of hedges or rails. Time. It floweth in July and August, the seed being ripe shortly after. Government and virtues. It is moderately hot and moist according to the nature of Jupiter. It is under Jupiter and the sign of Cancer, and strengthens those parts under that planet and sign, and remove diseases in them by sympathy. And those under Saturn, Mars, or Mercury by antipathy. And if they happen in any part of the body governed by Jupiter or under the signs of Cancer, Sagittarius, or Pisces, and therefore must needs be good for the gout, either used outwardly in an oil or ointment, or inwardly as an electuary or syrup, or concreted juice. For which see the latter end of the book. It has moreover been recommended in dropsies and the jaundice. Externally, as indeed its use. I have seen very bad sore legs, cured by bathing and fermenting them with a decoction of this plant. So if you've got sore legs, bony, muscly, whatever, and it's not sciatica, agrimony. It is of a cleansing and cutting faculty, without any manifest heat, moderately drying and binding. It openeth and cleanseth the liver, helpeth the jaundice, and is very, very beneficial to the bowels, healing all inward wounds, bruises, hurts, and other distempers. The decoction of the herb made with wine and drunk is good against the biting and stinging of serpents. Again, yeah? And helps them that have a foul, troubled, or bloody water, that causes them to make water clear and speedily. So if your piss stinks and you've got blood in it, this sorts it out. Yeah? Agrimony. The decoction of the herb made with wine and drunk is against the biting and stinging serpents, and will help in the foul, troubled, or bloody water, and causes them to make clear water speedily. So it clears it up very quick. It also helpeth the chloric and cleanseth the breast and relieves the cough. So the cough, you got a dry cough? There you go. A draught of decoction taken warm before the fit first relieves and in time removes the Tutarian or quartan auger. The leaves and feed taken in wine stay the bloody flux, outwardly applied, being stamped with old swine's grease, so that's pig fat. It helpeth all sores, cancers, and invertebrate ulcers, and draweth forth thorns, splinters of wood, nails, or any such thing gotten into the flesh. It helpeth to strengthen the members that be out of joint, and being bruised and applied, or the juice dropped in. It helpeth foul and impostumed ears. Now then, the distilled water of the herb is good to all the said purposes, either inward or outward, but is a great deal weaker. So if you distill it, it's weaker. I cannot stand to give you reason of every herb why it cureth such diseases, but if you please to peruse my judgment in the herb wormwood, you shall find it there. It will be well worth your while to consider it in every herb. So he's saying add wormwood to everything. You shall find them true throughout the book. So that's another two to look at there, Agrimony and Amara Dulcis. And as I've said, I've now put the report on site, the document, the book in full is a PDF. You can download it from there. And I'm also applying these as we go through them as I've translating them for a bit more of an easy read. So there we go. The end of another Sunday live stream. I hope it's been informative. And of course, you don't have to get up tomorrow because it's bank holiday. And I will say to you all, thank you for taking part. Thanks, Ray, especially for your efforts again in the weeks previous. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will say till the next time.